Hey everyone, it's me, Arthur Kade. One of my longtime obsessions has been this phenomenal show on Nat Geo, Brain Games. You get to host it, Jason Silva.
Yeah.
I'm so jealous. And you've got a new show. One wasn't enough, so you had to go two. And you tell us about how humankind became what we became, right?
That's right. So Origins is a new series on National Geographic that really tells the journey of humankind, essentially how we domesticated ourselves. Every episode looks at a key origin moment, a key technology, a key cultural transformative seed moment that changed the game. So we look at things like fire, we look at things like transportation, we look at things like communication, and we tell the story of that feedback loop. First we build the tools, but then the tools build us, and it kind of reinvents the genre of historical history of humanity storytelling. So
I feel like it's Cosmos, but of humans.
thank you.
Right?
Put. That's what we're trying
There's
to
your
go.
sales pitch, Nat Geo. Cosmos for humans.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Carl Sagan is a hero of mine, Neil deGrasse Tyson as well. And if you think of Cosmos as telling the story of the universe, we're telling the story of humankind. So it's Cosmos about humankind. You got it.
I was just talking to Neil recently, and it strikes me how popular he is.
Yeah.
And to see this evolution right now of personalities like Neil, like Bill Nye, who has a talk show coming out, you're the younger version of that group.
Oh.
Is it crazy to see how science is cool again?
Yeah, well, there's that famous Facebook page, I effing love science, which you're probably familiar with.
No, I have to check this out.
Okay, so literally that's what they're called. I effing love science, and they have like millions and millions of followers. So I think the idea is a kind of radical embrace of scientific inquiry that says science is cool, knowledge is cool, especially in the age of fake news and filter bubbles, that we need rock stars for scientific inquiry. We need wonder junkies, as Carl Sagan used to describe himself. So I think it's important. I'm trying to do my part, you know?
There's a lot of brilliant people out there, but not a lot of people who can translate that with charisma and personality to television. When did you realize, maybe I can make it on TV?
I used to. Well, my mom's a teacher. She's sitting over there.
She is here. My mom. Speaking of which, my mom wouldn't show up to anything. That is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. She teaches literature, English literature. So I grew up in an environment where ideas were celebrated, where passion was a currency, so to speak. And I think my interest in conveying fascination in a fascinating way, or at least try to, is that, the medium is the message. So I can be explaining to you the scale of the universe, but if I don't do it in a way that compels you to truly contemplate the implications of what I'm saying, then, if a tree falls and nobody hears it, does it make a sound, as my mom used to say. So I think it's that. I want to impregnate people with a sense of awe and give them some kind of transformative awakening if I can,
That might be the greatest catchphrase ever. I want to impregnate people with a sense of awe.
Yeah.
I'm using that later on a red carpet.
Sounds great.
I want to impregnate you with information.
Yes.
Brain Games has become such a monster hit.
I know.
Is
5
it-
seasons, man.
Is it, and it's like their number one show. Is it like mind-boggling? I mean, you were just hosting live with Kelly to see the exposure the show's
trip.
given you. That's got to be cool.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, Brain Games, when it came out, we broke records for National Geographic for new series show launch, and we were nominated for an Emmy, and we ended up doing it for 5 seasons, 3.5 years. 150 countries. I mean, that blew up. And again, it's a show about brain science. Like, Mom, I'm doing a show about brain science. And guess what? Kids like it also. A demographic outside even of National Geographic's main audience opened up this whole world to kids that loved brain science. So if Brain Games was the show that teaches you how your brain works, then Origins is the show that then shows you how we got here. And yeah, it's been amazing.
When you look at Origins, I was telling you before we got started, I'm fascinated about how we developed as humanity and evolved.
Yeah.
What did you learn? What were some of the key moments that you were like, oh my God, I had no idea about this or that?
Well, I'm interested in the counterintuitive insights that you get when you look at the origins of how man became who he became, or how we became who we became. There's a famous book that we use as inspiration for one of our episodes. It's called How Cooking Made Us Human. And this is a great example. So when man first domesticated fire, it was like a double-edged sword. We could cook meals for the first time, or we could burn the villager next door, who was looking at your girlfriend. So destructive and creative at the same time. But here's the thing. Domesticating fire and cooking for the first time made every meal, right, more energy efficient, more bioavailable, more absorbable, so you could stay full for longer after a single meal. Before cooking, most of our free time was spent chewing. Not much else, just chewing.
God, that must have been awful.
Miserable.
Awful.
Once you can cook, every meal becomes more efficient. Brain starts to grow. You stay full for longer. And in that full leisure time that emerges for the first time, culture, arts and crafts, creativity emerged because we didn't have the time. We didn't have the resources before that for any kind of human activity outside of bare survival. So in a way, without cooking, which was an external artificial technological stomach that pre-digested every meal, nothing else could have come after that. So that's a crazy example.
And you would never think, like, you just made cooking sound like calculus, but you would never think because we take it so for granted. Like,
right.
I couldn't figure out how to work our coffee machine this morning.
Correct.
We were joking. Actually, my producer goes, you have to ask Jason. I'm a Diet Coke and Diet Pepsi addict. Like,
we gotta get you off of that, man.
I didn't realize how bad it is, and I was crushing like 2 liters a day. Is it addictive? I mean, is it bad for you?
Well, I think anything that gives you pleasure has the potential to be addictive. The question is whether it adds something to your life or takes away from your life, because addiction is just something that hijacks the reward mechanism in the brain that we naturally have. We get a hit of dopamine, which is no different than what you get from doing cocaine, but you get a hit of dopamine naturally from your brain's biochemistry when you fall in love, when you have sex, when you see a pretty girl, when you see a trailer for a movie that you're excited to see. Anytime novelty shows up, excitability, your brain rewards you for that, but that can be co-opted and exploited like slot machines and casinos, and also by sugary drinks that, taste too good to be true. So you have to be careful of how you employ the natural reward systems built into your brain. So it's not an easy thing. It's not just whether something is addicting or not. It's whether it serves your life or not.
That should be your third show, how to break people's habits with Diet Coke and Diet Pepsi. If you would have seen me trying to work the coffee machine today, it was like, speaking of a caveman learning cooking, that's what was happening this morning. It was awful. I was like, what do I do with this ninja? It's awful.
Yeah.
When you see what's happening with your own career, we were joking around with Live with Kelly. That must have been such a kick-ass experience. And that's something, someone like Christian Slater's hosting. People
I know. Movie stars, famous people.
So to have someone who has a science show, is it mind-blowing for you?
Completely. I mean, I went to school for philosophy and film. That was my double major, and it was because I loved ideas and I loved cinema, or really just any kind of media, as a means to tell interesting stories, to convey meaningful ideas. And I used to make videos since I was like 12 years old. My mom bought me my first camcorder in 1994. Okay, like I was making videos, and I used to host these salons in high school and gather like my most interesting friends, and we'd videotape each other, like sharing insights. I mean, we were a little bit pretentious for high schoolers, but I was always in love with making media about meaningful ideas. And I never thought that I could mainstreamify something like that. I don't know if mainstreamify is a word, but again, science, philosophical inquiry, just like, let's get heady. Like, it's cool to be smart. Let's dig deep into the questions that drive the human condition. And the fact that I get to go on a show like Live with Kelly talking about, brain games, neuroscience, and the human. I mean, it's a total trip, right? Like, it's a miracle for me. So I was thrilled.
I love it.
Yes.
When you look at where science is moving, there's so many questions right now. Obviously, the political climate is a very controversial one. There's a lot of questions around climate control. And I was talking to Neil about this as well.
Yeah.
What do you think about these questions right now of science versus fake news?
Yeah, well, I think the problem is that we tend to want to reinforce our worldview. One of the problems with filter bubbles on Facebook is that we hit like for whatever reinforces our pre-existing biases. And just like we have cognitive biases in the way that we perceive the world, we have the same thing in our opinions, our cultural affiliations. And we're stuck in our reality tunnel, as Robert Anton Wilson used to say. But I think zooming out and looking at the big picture, what we really need is to pierce our filter bubble. I mean, the most extreme example is an astronaut going into orbit and seeing the Earth as one single whole entity and having what they call the overview effect, a transformative moment that changes their worldview, changes their perspectives, changes their priorities. I think we need to find a way to have the masses to have a transformative overview experience. And it's certainly not going to happen while people stay within their filter bubble. So we need to inject people with a sense of scientific awe and curiosity and a willingness to question dogma and overcome their their biases. So I think we need to put more scientists on the front page of the newspaper, basically.
What do you think about what's happening digitally right now? It feels like a revolution and an evolution like we've never seen before. What do you think about it?
Well, the reason that the technological or digital revolution is disrupting all industries is because information technology, and most people don't know this, evolves at an exponential pace. The human brain is designed, our intuition is to think linearly about change. So let's say you're taking 30 steps, 30 linear steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where do you land? You land at 30, right? Mm-hmm. If you take 30 exponential steps, which is how digital technology evolves, 30 exponential steps, you go 2, 4, 16. By step 30, you're at 1 billion. Right? So that's why the smartphone in your pocket today is 1 million times cheaper, 1 million times smaller, yet 1,000 times more powerful than what 40 years ago was half a building in size and cost $60 million. So that's where we're at. So digital technology in the future, we're talking artificial intelligence, we're talking non-biological minds, we're talking computers the size of blood cells in our bodies and brains. I mean, we're talking engendering a kind of godhood for ourselves, true transhumanism of the, transcending the biological limitations of the human experience. That's what's going to happen. I mean,
that was a subtle pitch to National Geographic for his next shows, by the way, just so everybody's aware. AI, hosted by Jason Silva.
But look, I think that one of the key things is when people get scared about the speed at which these digital technologies are changing everything, not just disrupting the media, but disrupting every industry, is that people get scared because they think that these technologies are like somehow unnatural. There's like the Frankensteinian scenario about artificial intelligence, for example. But I think a more interesting way to think about it is to think of these technologies as extensions of our creativity, sort of like the human mind turned inside out, right? If you think of technology as our extended phenotype or our second skin, the spider has the spider's web, the termite has the termite colony, we have our cities and the internet.
We have our iPhones.
Yeah, it's truly our second skin. In fact, there's a bunch of, not to get like overly heady here, but there's a bunch of cognitive philosophers who make the argument that the mind is distributed between brains and our tools and our environments. In other words, part of our thinking happens beyond our brain. It happens in our smartphones and happens in the feedback loops between our brains and our smartphones. And so thought of in that way, we realize that this is part of what it means to be human. That camera is part of the human brain. All these things are part of the human enterprise, even the spaces that we live in. Terence McKenna used to say, the man-made world is the condensation of human imagination. All of this was made of thought. It was built, it was designed, it was conceived.
You're awesome.
I know, it's a trip. Sorry.
Everybody's got to watch Origins. I think you're that next group, man. I was talking to Neil, and I think you're that next group behind Neil and Bill that's going to lead a new generation of young scientists. I remember when people come up and they're like, "Oh my God, I grew up watching Bill Nye." You're that group that younger generation is going to come up and say, "I was watching Jason Silva," so it's really cool, man.
Yeah, well, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Everyone, make sure to check out Origins Mondays at 9 o'clock on National Geographic.